Hello, friends, and welcome to the Marble and Sand podcast, a podcast for health and wellness with a focus on vegan lifestyles and vegan eating. Welcome to episode 5 of the Marble and Sand podcast. It is March 15th, and it is Women's History Month. In today's episode, I'd like to talk about some of the health complications that come with being a woman, and in particular, being a Black woman in the workplace. And I'm going to be discussing some events that have happened in my life personally, and also my mother's life when it comes to our careers, our families, and how that impacts our health and well-being. Hello, Mother. How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful, Mia.
That's good. So, I'd like to discuss how you navigated through your career post-college and any struggles or hardships you face being a woman, being a Black woman, and how that impacted your career.
Post-college was beautiful of a transition. I was immediately hired into a wonderful company in Atlanta, Georgia, after graduating from Clark College. And I later took those skills to Chicago, Illinois, where I transitioned into United Airlines Incorporated. As a reservation sales and service representative, there were many opportunities awarded to me. I wore several hats. I later decided in the late 1980s, or about 1985, to take a transfer to Honolulu reservations in Hawaii, where I found it to be rather challenging for a cultural experience. Not only amongst the natives of the island, but within my own culture there. I can remember when there was an African American male whom I became friends with. He informed me that he was hired at the company later than myself, but was making more money than me.
And was it the same position?
The same position at the same office.
And how did that make you feel, knowing that you had more experience and that someone else who was a male who was hired after you received more pay than you?
At first, I was startled, but I decided to turn that into positivity and work harder, because there was a time frame with United Airlines where you could maximize your salary within X amount of years. So I went very hard into that outlook on life, in knowing that I wanted to maximize my salary as quickly as possible. So I didn't let it bother me that much, knowing that my coworker, my peer, was making more than me.
I can only imagine what it's like to feel like you're not inadequate, but maybe just not living up to your fullest potential. Because for me personally, if I were in your position, Mother, and I was working with someone and we were doing the same job and I had more experience and they were making more money, that would put a drain maybe on my mental health. Like it would put me into depression, since I do have a history of depression. It would make me feel inadequate, like I wasn't good enough. Do you feel like you went through any depressive states while you were working with United in Hawaii?
No, maybe because I was so preoccupied with life in Hawaii. The cost of living is so expensive. So I always had to stay on top of my finances. I was also attending classes at Hawaii Pacific University, and I was dating your father. So therefore, I was preoccupied and didn't have time to be sad or to compare those things that I didn't have.
I think this past year has been more difficult because I haven't had those things to preoccupy me like before. Because before I was always working as well. So I didn't really have time to worry about other people's pocketbooks and how I compare to them, because I was too busy living my own life, trying to get to work on time, trying to make sure I had enough money for Starbucks to get my coffee before work, trying to see what events I can schedule to work and make more money. So I would say pre-2020, I was probably a little too consumed to worry about my depression as well. But this past year, having to be more alone, spend more time alone, I've definitely become more introspective. And I think that that's caused me to be a bit more depressed, especially since my career isn't exactly where I want it to be. The industries I worked in, like hospitality and events and marketing, hasn't really came back, although now it's starting to slowly come back. So I definitely think that this past year in particular has put me in a more introspective point of view, which has intensified my depression. But it's definitely something that I think is personal to me. So you talked about how you more so dealt with the kind of sexism aspect while being in Hawaii working. Do you feel like you ever dealt with more of like any racial tension in the workplace, or even just your regular life outside the workplace while you were living in Hawaii?
Oh, yes. The culture there is quite different. And being African American, I don't feel as though you're considered to be first or second class citizens in Hawaii. It's unfortunate. I'm sure things have changed since the 80s and 90s, but that's how I felt then. I did, however, become accustomed to it, and once I became accustomed and became knowledgeable of their culture, I was able to interact with those better, which made my life easier. And I didn't have to compare myself from not being from the island. I started to think that I was a native. Not so much being born there, but living and working, being a vital component of the system there. I felt I belonged to the community. By the time you were born, I was quite comfortable living in Hawaii.
Well, then why did you leave?
I left because your father had to go to the war in 1990.
Okay. But you could have stayed while he went abroad to serve.
I could have, but I needed a babysitter.
And those are expensive.
Not only is it expensive, but I didn't know how to quite effectively interview a babysitter, the best fit for your upbringing. So I thought that your grandparent and your great-grandparents
Back here in Chicago.
in Chicago would be the better fit.
Okay. So while you were in Hawaii, you felt like you didn't really have a support system to raise a child. And it was kind of like, since my father was serving, like you were, well, not a single parent, but sort of in those aspects, you were a single parent. What do you think would have helped you feel like you had more of a support system and want to stay there?
If my parents would have flown to Hawaii upon the baby's birth and stayed there to guide me in balancing work and family, just life, the transition would have been better, because if they would have flown, maybe not after you were born, but when it was time for me to go back to work, say, okay, we have a plan. You go back to work and I'll come to Hawaii and I'll stay with Mia. And then slowly the transition would have taken place and taken root.
I'm assuming at that time, because growing up here in Chicago, my grandmother always worked. So she always had a job and career. So I'm assuming she wouldn't come to Hawaii because she was working for, I believe, the health insurance company, and she had her own career. So why would you want her to uproot her life and career to come to Hawaii?
No, I'm saying she could have taken maybe a family leave of absence.
Oh, okay. You mean like just take a vacation?
And just around the time when I was to go back to work, say, okay, I'm coming for 2 weeks. Yeah, like an extended vacation. So I didn't have that type of talks amongst my family members. I just thought the best way to make it work was to pack you up and move you back to Chicago.
Okay, I can understand that. So it seems to me that it can be really difficult for women to balance their work career and also being a mother. And it seems like maybe women don't have the support they need at home in order to be successful at both, like being a caring and nurturing caregiver and also being successful and driven and progressive at work. So do you feel that once you came back to Chicago that you had the support to grow in your career and also raise me, or do you think some of that support was still lacking even though you changed your geography?
Changing my geography, transferring back to Chicago, did not increase the support that I thought I would receive from family members. As you had previously mentioned, my mother worked full-time. My grandparents were getting elderly. So it was quite difficult for me with you moving back to Chicago in the 90s, in 1990 to be exact. I had to safeguard the home by locking cabinets, and I had to buy baby bed, of course, and I wanted rocking chair and, the car seat, the normal things that you need. However, I just needed someone full-time to be with you while I was away at work, and while I was nurturing a career with United Airlines. I wanted to foster that career and move from my current status into a promotion that was totally off limits. I was not able to do that.
And why is that?
Because I felt as though I needed more schooling, and I could not simply go to school. My off days needed to be with you, and they were expected of me to be with you. So if I wanted to take a class on a Saturday or on my off days,
like a weekend MBA program,
yes, I wasn't able to do that effectively. I didn't have a support system. My expectations from your grandparents, from my mother, it did not equate to my success. So therefore, I was let down in hopes of aspiring those promotions and obtaining and setting those career goals that I needed for us to live a lifestyle that I felt you were entitled to.
I do feel as though growing up you did work a lot, and I think I did take that somewhat personally because unfortunately my father did pass when I was 4 years old, and I don't remember him much. And I do remember growing up, and while my mother was at work, I would take the school bus to my aunt's house, to my uncle's house after school. I remember being in before school care. I remember being in after school care. I remember sometimes it felt like I was at school from 6, 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. So I do think it's hard being a single mother and having to juggle all that. I would say that the past 12 and a half years of being an adult have been pretty hard to navigate. I do feel as though being a woman and being a Black woman, at times people have underestimated me, and it has somewhat stifled my potential. I think some people judge me based on my voice as well, because it's pretty soft-spoken and can be high at times. So people assume that I don't have that much knowledge or capability. I'm sure a lot of it comes from just our subconscious. And a lot of times we're not even aware of how we're prejudging people before we even get to know them. So I think that's something we can all work on, is just not judging others. Like they say, don't judge a book by its cover. Very old saying. But yeah, it's something that still rings true. I would say that my first half of being an adult, I wasn't taking it as seriously as I possibly could, and that probably didn't help me in my career growth. I feel like from 18 to 23, 24, I wasn't as focused. I really wanted to have more of a social life and go to parties and have a boyfriend and date and do all of those things. And I think when I became 24 is when I had my first quarter life crisis, or it began to set in, because I felt like, okay, well, I thought I was doing everything I'm supposed to do. That's when social media was really becoming popular in those like early 2010s. Instagram had came out like in 2012, and I just wanted to be seen everywhere. I went to a lot of different parties, and I was trying to work on a lot of different film projects because I really wanted to get into directing, and I liked video editing and producing, but I wasn't really that focused. So I want to say from 25 until now, I have become more focused. I focus my energy on working in the events industry and working different promotions for different clients, in particular technology clients. So I would say that's what I'm more passionate about. And then I also did finish up my bachelor's, which was really hard because when I first started out in school at 18, I didn't do so well my first year in college. I wasn't focused. I was trying to maintain a relationship with a boyfriend and maintain a relationship with my friends. I was also dealing with issues of discrimination from my roommates in college. And that was pretty difficult, and I think that comes from preconceived notions too that my roommate may have had about me. But we argued a lot, and it felt like it was about nothing looking back. I think that just happens when you have like teenagers and hormones, and you're from two different backgrounds, and things like that just happen. So I'm really glad that over the years, because now I'm 30 and I feel like, I can relate to people from like really any background, or I'm just more empathetic. So these past 6 years, I've definitely learned to become more empathetic to people and understand where they're coming from. And everyone you encounter has lived an entire life before they met you, and you don't know what that life consists of. So I definitely look at things from that perspective. And then also these past 6 years, I've had the opportunity to really experience a lot of things, working for different clients and going to different events. But I realized that even though I have been really focused and more career driven, this past year has shown that your career can be flipped upside down, and you go from working the entire time to not working at all. And it's like you have this void to fill, and you have this emptiness. And I think that's something that I dealt with because I didn't really have a balanced life, and I'm still working towards getting a balanced life. So I think that that's something I must continue working on, and we all can continue to work on. It's just creating that balance so that if one part of our life is gone, we're not left feeling empty. Like if your whole life revolves around your career, and then that job is gone, you're laid off or furloughed, then it's like, okay, well, I haven't really been building up my friendships. I haven't really built up my social life. I don't have any hobbies. I don't have anything else going on. So then you just feel kind of stuck. So that's definitely something this past year I've been working to achieve and maintain, is just having more of that balance. I'd like to turn back to my mother now and ask her about her time at United. She did retire in 2008, so she worked there from the mid-late 80s to 2008. And Mommy, I'd like for you to let us know why you left in 2008 and if you believe it has to do with your lack of career growth.
In 2008, I was a successful candidate at United Airlines for their leadership development program. I interviewed and was successfully placed within the program, and the program went on for several months until we had to demonstrate what we had learned in the class, in the program, by bringing in and speaking and educating the peers within the class on something that was dear to us, something that we knew, we felt comfortable with, and it was important to us. And after that, the program ended. We were a part of the program. We were to be placed in a management position upon completion of the program. It was announced on the final day of the program that the program would be canceled, that it will not be moving forward with the obligation of placing us into management, that the company was going total international. I was a domestic employee, meaning that my customer base would fly domestically, not internationally. But I was informed that every employee would have to be trained or retrained to accept, receive, and handle any caller, whether domestically or international flyers. And it wasn't the direction that I had hoped for. I was placed in an international reservations class where I had already taken this class about 10 years earlier when I wanted to be an international agent. And it was I who moved from international to domestic. And now it was the company who was forcing us to all be international reservation sales and service representatives. And in order to successfully and effectively do that particular job, we had to be trained. It was sitting in the training class that brought me full circle within the realms of United Airlines and my life, and where I had hoped to be and where I was.
So while you were sitting in that training class, I guess what went through your mind was you had worked with United for all of these years, and you just felt as though, okay, well, I already took this 10 years ago and I'm not where I want to be, and now I'm taking this again. So is that where you kind of had, not like an epiphany, but that's what it kind of sounds like, an epiphany, where you felt like, okay, working here at this company right now in this moment is not going to put me in the trajectory I'd like to be in.
I would say that is exactly correct, Mia. An epiphany, whereas my life was stagnant. I was not moving in the direction that I had hoped to be moving in. And I needed to somehow get out. So during the training class, United offered another program. It was called an early out program, whereas employees with 10 years or greater would be eligible to partake of this program. They would receive 1 year of monthly stipends, along with lifetime of travel benefits, which also include other airlines, international airlines, etc. I believe discounts at your hotels, rental car agreements. I believe those are still ongoing as well. It was attractive to me. I couldn't have asked for a better program at that particular time in my life when I felt hopeless.
This makes me wonder if a lot of women feel hopeless in their careers. Like once they reach a certain point, they've worked for a company for 10, 20, 30 years, and they haven't seen the growth. I think that that's something that definitely needs to change in our society, and we need to value our female employees. We need to empower them. They need to be on track for leadership programs and to be as successful as possible. I feel as though throughout my life, since I was raised without a father, I feel like I didn't really have that push, to really drive me into being as competitive as I needed to be. Growing up, things have always came sort of easily. Schoolwork was pretty easy, and I learned things quickly. So I never really pushed myself as hard as I possibly could to be successful, since a lot of things come naturally to me. And I think that's something that has stifled my success and creativity as far as a career goes. I do enjoy doing lots of things, and I think just liking to do everything also has kind of stifled me as well. It's important for women to feel focused. It's okay to focus on one thing. I think for me personally, I felt like I would miss out on something if I didn't if I focus completely on one thing and not do a whole bunch of things, then I would miss out on an opportunity, because I always felt, well, you never know who you're going to meet going here, going there, working this event, working on this TV set, and that was always in the back of my mind. But I think if I would have taken more time to just hone into my craft and just focus in on doing one thing and doing that one thing greatly and well, I would be at a better success than I am today. This concludes episode 5 of the Marble and Sand podcast. And I'd like to thank my mother for sharing her story with me and her life career and everything that she's been through.
You're welcome, Mia. It was my pleasure.
And we will see you next time. And I wish you well on your health and wellness journey.